You know what? Today, may chance, is the day that stuff finally works for the first time ever. So pipes just look like this usually, right? You have a value on the left-hand side, anything, and then you pipe it into a function. So let's say an anonymous function where you take a c, multiply it by 2, that's going to be your for. That's going to be your for. And if you have est, you can do string.upper. And you have that. You have all of that. It's asserted as the first argument. And that's like the basics of it. That's all that you need, technically. But I wanted to make it a little bit nicer. Well, I got a suggestion to make it a little bit nicer. It mimics Gleam in a way. You can actually use a placeholder here. So what it does is, as long as it finds a function which doesn't, if a function doesn't use the placeholder, right? So, for example, a mutate is not a function on a, it's just a function somewhere else. You give it a 2, and then it's gonna call mutate with the first argument being a and the second argument being 2. But if you use an underscore somewhere, it just walks the entire tree, it visits it. And if it finds an underscore, it's like, yo, no, don't do that. Don't put it as the first argument, and then it lets you have like complete control of what you do with it. And this works not only for calls, so that's a special case. It also works for any expression ever. So do end is an expression, and inside of that expression, it goes down to here, down to here, down to here. Oh, that's an identifier that is an underscore, which means, well, first of all, it's not a function, so this is always going to have an underscore here. It doesn't even check. But yeah, you just use an underscore here. That also has some implications. For example, if you make a little function, so what's funny actually is let me remember project/soup right here, and then read my I made a super similar thing. So result. Yeah. Result.result. They just look like this. You have an like OK/error union right here. A tagged union. Tagged enum is called a what? What's it called like in algebraic terms? I forgot. Yeah, it's a sum type, no? I think it's a sum type. Uh, whatever. You bind it somewhere, you bind it to a closure, and then the closure will return either OK or an error, or anything ever. So, and then you bind that further, and the further you go down the line, each time it checks whether it's an OK. If it's an OK, it says, this function exactly. If it gets an OK, it executes that and then returns that. Otherwise, it just returns the error value and then passes it down the line. And at some point, it's going to hit an unwrap or else. In that case, it processes the error, and that just goes like towards the end of the whole chain, just like that. That's very similar to Rust, in fact, because I stole that from Rust in this project. But this is Lua, and Lua is like a language that has very verbose syntax. If not line, then end, bind function, this whole like big thing with an end. But why would you do that? Why would you do that? You don't do that here. You don't do that here. Instead, you do fn. Well, let me actually first of all show you that this works. Run examples pipes RV. They are equivalent. They are equivalent. Oh, also inspect. Inspect. Maybe some people are not familiar with this. But what inspect does is it just takes the value that comes in and then it prints it and then it returns it. This is not the same for prints. I was thinking maybe I want to do something different with print, but no. Maybe I want to transform print to be like this little function that print f's instead. So for example, s, and then you have this, and then you have this. Maybe this makes a little bit more sense. And then you don't have anything that should be meaningfully returned, so I just return an OK here, or error if it fails. So anyways, oh yeah, bind. So you just do it like that, fn bind, you do it trolley, and then you track. I got it from a guy in my comments who's super experienced and stuff. And this is called railway-oriented programming. I never knew that. But then you mention the thing, okay, in value, then you put the trolley on the track, right? But if it's an error, or actually if it's anything else, right? Track V, right? And if it's anything else, you just do it like that. You put the whole thing on there. Wait, no, wait, that's not. Am I stupid? I might be stupid. Let me undo. Oh yeah, let's go. Yeah, just like this. Let's go. At some point, I tried to do actual like fully professional documentation, and then I erased all of it. And that is important. But I don't feel like doing like actual good professional documentation where stuff is like, C# documentation. I kind of want to I kind of wanted to be like a little more serious, but I ended up not doing that. I just leave it as is. Anyways, yeah, this is how they look. So you have a bind, you have an RL, so it's gonna be called an unwrap RLs in Rust. Let me check if this still compiles. It does. It does. And then you do let v equals okay, and then 5, right? And then you bind that to a function of c, do end, and in that function you do c by 2, and you do what? You return an okay and then c by 2, right? And then you go forth. You do unwrap or else. Otherwise, yeah. So if you get an error, it goes here. If I'm not super, because I slept for like 2 hours today. I did not give code any meaning today. All right, all of that, and then we inspect that right here. So we get an okay and then a 20. Because 5 by 2 and then by 2, but if it's an error, we say yo. We return, let's say, an okay of 0. And we did get an error here, and then we did return an okay of 0. But if it wasn't an error, say, for example, we would be like, okay, c by 2, this is not 0, this is going to be 42. And then we get a 42. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it? And that's how you do any monadic pattern. Now, as a matter of fact, we used to have this. We used to have this with just this. So you would have it like that. Instead of a whole closure, you would just make a little lexical scope. But the reason that this wasn't actually, like the fact that I removed it, what if, for example, you want to bind net, no, response, bind HTTP rest. I have to look at my keyboard today. And then you manage the trolley. Let me do it like that. Let me just do it like that. All right, okay, and okay, and then we do when okay dot status is less than is over 400 and okay dot status is below 500. No, greater or equals 400 and less than 500. Check okay, and then with all of that, you just put it like that. So you do error okay. Now. How do we process this? Yeah, I think this should be turned into an error. No. Let's say it's just not processed, but it goes further. It goes forward, and that's how you do a bind for HTTP, for example. That's how you do a custom one. And with this syntax, the whole magic dies. The entirety of the magic dies because you can't actually do this. You'd have to have it like that, but then you would have to have it like that. FNC binds HTTP, is this? No, that's just not something that you want to do here. It's just not. And it breaks the whole flow, but having it be fully explicit, fully customized, like actually flexible, instead of just a few cases that look good on surface, that makes a little bit more sense to me at least. It was also handled by the compiler first, but now it's not. It's not like it's handled in the past. It just desugars to that. And instead of making a closure here, for example, this is not a closure, even though it uses like all of that. It would be like a lexical scope, right? Okay. And also, you don't have to do it fancy. You can just do it like that, obviously. And you can actually not execute all of that. You can. Am I stupid? No. You should make it conditionally executable because otherwise it's just gonna execute stuff that you don't want to do. Like yeah, absolutely. You have to do it for closures. Yeah. So yeah, that's how it is. I hope this was coherent today, because it may not have been. Thank you for listening.